The tax system is broken. Here is how to actually fix it. Let me start with something that is going to sound radical, mostly because we have been conditioned to think inside a box so small that actual constitutional governance looks like revolutionary theory. A fellow veteran and libertarian I follow on X, at Lucis Louv Child MG, dropped a proposal that stopped me cold. Simple premise, devastating logic. The federal government bills the states directly based on their population for their share of the national budget. The federal government gets its roughly 18% of national GDP. Citizens get privacy from a government that currently has access to your entire financial life without a warrant. States design and fund their own tax systems, flat tax, fair tax, current progressive model, whatever their residents vote for and compete for citizens the way businesses compete for customers. Here is the part that makes the science teacher in me genuinely excited. Your GDP is not taxed at the federal level. The state keeps every dollar of economic growth it generates. The federal bill is based on population, meaning the state's only cost driver is the number of people living there, and the state's revenue is whatever those people produce. That alignment of incentives is something Washington has not managed to produce in over a century of trying. Let me walk through why it matters. The amendment everyone in Washington pretends does not exist. The 10th Amendment reads, "The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." Full stop. James Madison, the actual father of the Constitution, not some cable news commentator, wrote in Federalist Number 45 that the powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined, while those remaining with the states are numerous, indefinite. Hamilton reinforced this in Federalist Number 17, noting that local governance is proper to be provided for by local legislation and can never be desirable cares of a general jurisdiction. They built it this way on purpose. What we have now is the complete inversion, a colossal federal machine inserted between every citizen and their paycheck, between every doctor and their patient, between every state and its residents, while being catastrophically inefficient at almost everything it touches. This proposal does not violate the Constitution, it restores it. Untaxed GDP changes every state incentive. Under the current system, when your state grows, its economy business expands. Wages rise. New companies relocate. The federal government takes a cut. States that create prosperity ship a portion straight to Washington. There is no structural reward for the state. Economic growth is penalized. Now flip it. Federal obligation tied to population, GDP growth. The state keeps it entirely. Every additional dollar of economic output stays inside the state tax base. Zero federal penalty for prosperity. At the same time, every person in the census count who is not contributing economically is a direct, unambiguous liability, a real cost coming out of the same budget that funds roads and schools. So what does a state do? It invests in education because educated workers produce more and cover the per capita federal bill. It pursues full employment aggressively because every person on the payroll is revenue and every person on assistance is cost. It builds the most business-friendly environment possible because jobs turn dependents into contributors. 50 states racing each other to produce the highest GDP, best employed population with zero federal tax drag on the winner's prize. Justice Brandeis called this laboratories of democracy in 1932. He had no idea the illegal immigration problem solves itself. Right now, states have an active incentive to maximize census counts because more bodies means more federal dollars flowing in. California's congressional delegation is larger because of people who cannot legally vote. Sanctuary city policies are, in part, a financial calculation dressed up as compassion. Under population-based state taxation, every person in that census is a line item on the state's federal bill. A contributing, tax-paying resident covers their share and then some. An illegal immigrant working under the table, untaxed, drawing on state services, net loss, the state pays the per capita federal tax on a body that generates no offsetting state revenue. There's no longer any incentive to pad the count with non-contributors. None. The incentive runs entirely the other direction. Governor Newsom would be on the phone with ICE before the ink dried. I know what is next. California enforcing immigration law? Wait, I was just told the economics make it unavoidable. Yes, that is exactly what I am saying. The census becomes a double-edged sword. Here is something I genuinely cannot predict, and I want to be honest about that. Right now, the census is pure political upside. More people counted means more House seats, more congressional power, and more electoral votes. A state has zero financial reason to count conservatively. Count everybody, pad if possible, collect the political dividends. Under this model, that math gets complicated. More population still means more House representation and more electoral votes. Those benefits remain. But now population count also drives your federal tax bill. Every person added to the census is another per capita obligation against the state treasury. So states face a genuine tension that has never existed before. Count aggressively to maximize political power, knowing it increases your financial burden, or count conservatively to reduce your tax obligation, knowing it costs you congressional seats and electoral votes. That is not a flaw. That is the system working. That is what it looks like when political decisions carry actual costs instead of being consequence-free power grabs. I suspect some states will start pushing for mid-decade census verification. A state that invests in workforce development and cleans up its welfare rolls should not wait a full decade to see its reduced liability reflected in its federal bill. Conversely, a state gaming the count with non-contributors should not coast on inflated numbers for 10 years, while other states absorb a disproportionate share of the burden. The left has always claimed to love census accuracy. Let us find out if they mean it when accuracy starts costing them money instead of generating it. Welfare. When states pay for it, states fix it. Quinn's Law, number 25. Liberals are great at giving away other people's money. The current federal welfare architecture is the purest demonstration of this principle in American governance. Stripped of the compassionate framing, here's how it actually works. The federal government rewards states for maintaining larger welfare rolls by matching state spending with federal dollars. A state that moves people off assistance and into the workforce loses matching funds. Keep people dependent, keep getting paid. You could not engineer a worse system for actually helping people if you specifically tried. Under MG's model, states are still required to provide safety net programs, SNAP, Medicaid, housing assistance, federal minimums remain. But the state funds it with state money, and every long-term dependent costs the state twice. Once in direct program spending, and once in the per capita federal tax obligation their non-productivity generates. Suddenly, Ohio has a compelling reason to build SNAP with work requirements, time limits, and genuine job pathways. Because Ohio is paying for every part of it, and because getting someone employed means they flip from liability to revenue. If Ohio does it right, productive people move there, and GDP grows, which Ohio keeps. If Ohio does it wrong, people leave, and Ohio pays the per capita federal bill on whoever remains. That is accountability at a scale no federal mandate has ever produced. Fraud and waste collapse under their own weight. You want to understand why DOGE found what it found? Why empty office buildings in Columbus, Ohio build Medicaid for $250 million? Because the incentive structure makes it almost inevitable. Federal budgets claw back unspent money, so agencies spend everything regardless of need. Programs expand to justify headcount. Contractors multiply. NGOs proliferate. Oversight is a federal agency watching other federal agencies roughly as effective as asking the defendant to chair their own jury. State programs under real budgets operate differently. States cannot print money. They cannot run unlimited deficits. When programs compete within a limited state budget, redundancies collapse without a task force. The Appropriations Committee in the next election handle it. Switzerland figured this out a century ago, with 26 cantons running competing models. The result is one of the most financially stable, low corruption governance structures on earth. We had the same blueprint. It was in the Federalist Papers. Then, the 16th Amendment handed Washington a direct pipeline to every American's paycheck, and we spent the next century watching the result. File once with your state, under a code your neighbors voted for. Federal tax filing feels engineered to require professional help to comply with a law written by lobbyists whose clients are paying them to keep it complicated. Under this model, you file with your state, full stop. The federal government does not need your W-2, your investment statements, or your deduction history. It bills Ohio. Ohio bills you. Ohio chooses how. Flat tax? Fine. Fair tax? Absolutely. Progressive system? If that is what Ohioans vote for, fine by me. Environmental deductions? Put them in Ohio's code, and let residents decide if they are worth staying for. States that pile their code with social engineering face residents relocating to Indiana. That is real choice, not the kind where Washington permits you to be taxed slightly differently within their rules, but genuine competition, where the best system attracts the most productive people and keeps every dollar of what they produce. The party that loves democracy should love this. The left tells me every day they are the defenders of democracy. That power should be closer to the people, that local communities know best. Then they should be enthusiastically endorsing this. Maximum democratic accountability at the level closest to the voter. Do not like your state's tax code? Vote for different legislators. Still not satisfied? Move. Quinn's Law, number 22. Liberals love democracy unless it does not go their way. The moment states compete on policy and citizens choose with their feet, meaning high earners can leave high tax states without leaving the country, the enthusiasm for choice evaporates. Because real competition means accountability. And accountability is the one thing the modern administrative state was built to avoid. Why Washington will never propose this. The current system is a power structure. Federal funding purchases, compliance from states on questions that have nothing to do with legitimate federal authority, highway speeds, school curriculum, healthcare delivery. Strip away the direct taxation pipeline and the matching funds architecture, and Washington loses the leverage it uses to override the 10th Amendment daily. They will call this radical. They will claim it devastates the vulnerable. What they will not do is explain why 50 state governments, each accountable to their own voters every 2 to 4 years, would systematically do worse than a federal bureaucracy that has produced $37 trillion in debt, industrial-scale Medicaid fraud, and a poverty rate that has barely moved in 50 years of trillion-dollar interventions. Quinn's first law, always the opposite, every single time. The bottom line, 50 states, 50 laboratories, 50 competing models built on the actual constitution the founders designed. Tax population, not prosperity. Let states keep their GDP growth entirely. Watch every broken incentive in American governance flip simultaneously. It is not new, it is not radical. It is the 10th Amendment. It is Federalist number 45. It is what the political class has spent a century dismantling, because a government that must compete for citizens on merit is a government that can actually be held accountable. And that is apparently the one thing Washington cannot afford. Go follow MG at Lucis Lovechild and read the original thread. It deserves far more attention than it has gotten. Then ask yourself why no one in Congress is proposing it. That answer tells you everything about who the current system is actually built to serve. If this article made you think, like this article so the algorithm shows it to people who need to read it, share this. Every share really helps get the word out. Use it. Comment below with your take. Which incentive flip surprised you most? Immigration, welfare, or the census? Double-edged sword. Tell me. And if you want more of this, the data, the history, the science, the stories, join Beaskey's classroom community or follow me on YouTube. Even better, subscribe to my account. It is about the cost of a cup of coffee per month. That is it. Your support keeps this classroom open, and I promise I will never run out of material as long as the left keeps trying to outdumb itself. But what do I know? I am only a science teacher who understands that when you tax something, you get less of it. And when you leave something untaxed, you get more of it, which is apparently a concept too elegant for the people who have been running this country's fiscal policy into a $37 trillion hole.